Hello, you're the spirit of Lancelot Brown, aren't you? I'm Ariel, a heavenly messenger. I've got good news for you. It's 200 years since you died, and your long-felt wish to see the results of your work on Earth has been granted. I've rigged up a viewing system for you, but it will only work for a short time, so you had better not linger too long in any one place.
Oh, how splendid! Did anyone tell you why I wanted to see what's happened to my work?
No?
Well, you see, a lot of it was made for the enjoyment of future generations. Neither my patrons nor I were able to see the matured result in our own lifetimes. Well, we'd better get on with it. Let's start with Stowe, because this is where I began my career as a landscape gardener. This estate belonged to Lord Cobham, the great minister. He was a classicist, and he wanted his park to remind visitors of Greece and Rome with lots of temples. Considering that they're over 200 years old, they look very clean and new.
Hang on, I'll just check that a minute. Yes, they were in fact all cleaned and restored in the 1990s.
That explains it. Lord Cobham did add touches of his own. This wall is called an exedra. It's full of busts of Lord Cobham's heroes from ancient times, plus portraits of the contemporaries that he admired. Oh dear, I see that the hedge has been allowed to grow rather a lot, and it's obscured Alexander Pope. He won't like that. Oh, I'd better not tell him. That's William Kent's Temple of Ancient Virtue just over the water from the Exedra. It was designed for reading and contemplation, for which I never had the time, partly because Kent, who was my master and taught me my trade, kept me so hard at work.
Do you see any changes since your time?
Yes, quite a number of monuments have gone. I'm not very sorry about this, as I found so many classical allusions rather, well, excessive. You see, I followed the ideas of Pope and Switzer, and we believed that parklands should blend into the surrounding countryside. But temples or not, I have very fond memories of Stowe, for it was here that I met and married my Bridget, and that our first children were born.
Don't forget the time factor.
Right, let's have a look at Longleat. When I really got going on my own account, one of the features that I persuaded my patrons to adopt were clumps of trees planted on hillsides. Longleat was a good example, but 200 years is a long time even for trees, and I wondered if my plantations are still standing. Ah, excellent, here they are. And they've matured, just as I'd hoped. And the view of the house is pretty well as I remembered it. But Ariel, what are those strange boxes on wheels?
Oh, they're horseless carriages. In this century, they've replaced the horse as a means of transport. Oh, just ignore them. But look, here is a new development, a wildlife park.
Oh, that's nothing new. I designed many menageries for patrons who were given exotic beasts by overseas travellers.
What would you like to see next?
Well, another favourite feature of mine were serpentine lakes, which I created in many estates. This one at Petworth was difficult to make as we had to dig out all the soil to make it. It certainly looks fine. And the family, I'm very pleased to see, are keeping the edge neat. I always disliked an untidy edge. We used the soil that we dug out to build a small hill, and I planted oaks on it. These trees have also lasted, I see. Now, this is Bowood. A fine prospect, don't you think? Pity they haven't kept the edge neat and tidy. This lake divides the garden from the farmlands beyond. We actually had to move a village to make it, and the cottage on the other side was for the ferryman.
Right, well, so far we've seen lakes and trees. Anything else?
Well, you know, I designed houses as well as parks, so I would like to have a quick look at Claremont near Esher. I built this house for Lord Clive when he came back from India with riches almost beyond belief. At Claremont, I had help from my future son-in-law, Henry Holland. He later married one of my daughters, the one we named Bridget after her dear mother. It was Holland who designed the fine oval entrance hall. Actually, I didn't have much to do with the gardens. They'd been designed by Bridgman and improved by William Kent. But I did do something rather unusual at Claremont. I moved the London to Portsmouth Road some distance to the north so that it did not disturb the estate. I wonder what the road looks like now.
Let me show you what it's like on any ordinary evening.
My goodness, what a terrible noise. I'm sorry I asked.
You're mostly remembered as a designer of parks. Did you design many other buildings?
Well, in my day, you know, we weren't very specialised. Yes, I did do a few other houses. At Corsham Court, for instance, I added a new wing to conform with the existing Elizabethan house. This included a new picture gallery, which I'm told has been much admired. Ah, Ariel, look. The oriental plane tree that I planted is still alive, and it's enormous. It quite hides my little cold bath, which I designed for the family and which they found so refreshing.
Did you build this house?
Oh, no. This is Wilderness House at Hampton Court. It was given to me after my appointment as royal gardener. Here, Bridget and I were able to entertain our noble patrons in a fitting manner.
Did you often see the king?
Oh, yes, I frequently spoke with His Majesty when he took his ease in the grounds of the palace. He even asked my opinion on the problems caused by the American colonists. Of course, he knew of my friendship with William Pitt, Lord Chatham, who opposed the government's repressive policy. Can this be the little vine that I planted 200 years ago?
It most certainly is, and has prospered exceedingly. It is now the largest single vine in the whole world.
Well, that's very gratifying is the word. Well, Ariel, we'd better see my most famous garden, the one at Blenheim Palace. Really, you know, this was my masterpiece. Sir John Vanbrugh designed the palace 50 years before, but in 1764 I was commissioned to improve the park. My first task was to replace the ostentatious parterre on the south side by smooth lawns sweeping up from the farm estate. Next, I made the mighty lake. Before I started, this was just a small stream. But here we didn't have too much digging to do, as the stream ran between high banks. On the other hand, the water levels were crucial.
Well, here we are at the end of the lake, and you can see that your control system still works perfectly, 200 years later.
That's good, because the prospect from the town gate was the finest that I ever achieved. The lake, you see, passes under Vanbragh's fine bridge. But what have they done on my little island? Why, they've replaced my English beeches with Lombardy poplars. The shapes may be pleasing, but these are not native trees. This is what happens when I'm no longer in charge.
Well, really, Lancelot, I think you have no right to complain. You had the most rewarding life, working on 140 estates up and down the country. You were given the strength to travel in all weathers in spite of having asthma, and besides, you made many interesting friends.
Oh, yes, you're quite right, Ariel. Particularly as so many of my patrons accepted me as a real friend when I was working on their properties.
Not much time left now.
Well then, let's see something of Chatsworth. The Duke of Devonshire asked me to raise the level of the river so that his guests could see it from the ground floor rooms. and this still seems to be working satisfactorily. But my main effort was landscaping the park, with carefully placed clumps of trees and woods on the horizon. It's wonderful to see how well my hill plantations have matured. They look perfectly natural, just as I intended.
There is no doubt that your work changed people's ideas on what parks should look like. Some even say that you influenced the appearance of the English landscape as a whole, and that everywhere you look, even at farmland, you see woods and fields that you might have designed yourself. And what's more, you've given pleasure and inspiration to far more people than you can ever have expected or hoped, as these days anyone can visit these beautiful parks, and in fact hundreds of thousands do so every year. They still call you by the nickname you earned in your lifetime, Capability Brown.